This irks me. The clap chaser inside me is bothered by this. How is it that people who literally do nothing but... I understand why the Krasenstein brothers are in there. I understand why Sneako's in there. Myron, Destiny, Tristan Tate, Nick Fuentes, Andrew Tate. I understand these people being in here. Who on God's green earth are these other characters inside of this call? I genuinely want to understand why they're here, how they're here, what this means. Like, how are they welcome in this?
Question. I think he was asked, we were doing a space on Brazil. When he was asked that question, he said, a country's law, even though he might disagree with it, that's that's the line he cannot cross because he's running a business. Where do you think that line should be drawn, Destiny?
Well,
because we've been having I just want to add one more. Go ahead, Nick. Go ahead, Destiny.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, like to say the line is drawn at the law. I mean, is the most boring answer ever. Obviously, and if you're a business owner, you kind of have to operate there. But that's not the only place you can operate, right? Business owners can also make suggestions to Congress. They can have their appearances. They can talk to whoever they want to talk to. They can push culturally for the norms to change. People are dumber due to genetic reasons on whole versus white people. Like, that's the strong claim. You make the weak claim that is like everybody believes in it, but then like the strong claim goes unsaid, and that's usually what people are upset about. Which you can argue is good or bad, but so at least own up, man up and own your positions. Don't like say the most milquetoast, like obviously true things ever, and leave all the controversy, behind you. That's weak.
Yeah, see, the difference is that when you say these things, you're rephrasing them in the liberal perception way. You say, well, if you believe in race realism, that means you believe black people are dumb. No, if you believe in human biodiversity, you believe that there are genetic differences between people. IQ is a heritable trait, and blacks have a lower average IQ, on average, than white people. That's also a statistical fact.
Here's the problem with this whole IQ stuff. I'm not well read enough to sit here and debate somebody on it, but one thing I will say is this. A lot of people who are into the race realism thing that get banned don't want to talk about what actually comes after. Like, okay, let's say we embrace your race realism. What does that actually mean for society at large? Because saying controversial things and making controversial jokes, you can sit there and act like it's divorced from any sort of other realities, but when people sit there and say unbelievably hateful things about women, when people say unbelievably hateful things about black people, or when people are pushing race realism, there is a destination for these ideologies, and we have to talk about that. The problem is people like Nick Fuentes want to act as though they don't have a destination, as though their destination isn't probably the forceful deportation of certain racial groups. This is the part that bothers me, is they try to cut it off at that, I'm just seeking the truth. No, there's more to it than that. And that's a part of the conversation that they don't want to have. It's selective truth.
It's also true in SAT scores. It's also true in IQ tests globally and in America. I've never hid from that. I said that in front of a crowd of black people at Iowa State. I said that in front of Myron. Hang on, and Myron is here. I said that in front of a panel of all black women on Fresh and Fit.
That's a fact.
Because you're just reframing what I'm saying in a liberal way.
And
you're saying that if someone believes in genetic differences, then that means that you believe black people are dumb.
No,
and if you say that Jewish people influence society, you believe in a shadowy cabal where they're like evil wizards and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, of course I'm not going to say the caricature and the reframing that you're giving it because you disagree. You don't like that people find it persuasive. That's why you put me on a blacklist and said,
it's persuasive,
I will never stream a Nick Fuentes.
Because
but then when I'm on a big space, then you got to show up to derail and disrupt and say, all the persuasive stuff, well, he's just lying. There's secret evil views that he has that, well, you just aren't hearing right now. So that's why.
Okay, so Nick Fuentes is back on Twitter. So that means we need to figure out what's actually going on. So Nick Fuentes is back. Nick Fuentes has been brought back by Elon Musk. Let's see what's going on with him. So he's got his little Ye and Alex, and this was quick. He set up his account very quickly. America First, Elijah Schaefer. Lord have mercy. Let's see. He was unbanned. When was he brought back? I could have sworn he was brought back a day ago. One thing I don't understand about political influencers is the desire to constantly post shit. I could never in life become popular on social media and utilize Twitter constantly. Like, it just makes no sense to me. Andrew Tate says, welcome back, Nick Fuentes. Like, bruh, Andrew Tate is a mixed man. Andrew Tate is literally he is the production of the very thing Nick Fuentes considers to be immoral, which is race mixing. I wish that right wingers would grow a backbone and a spine and actually look people like Nick Fuentes in the face and say, sure, you may have been banned and I may have been banned, but we have some differences that cannot be fixed. Nick Fuentes, whether people like Myron, Sneako, and Andrew Tate want to admit it or not, Nick Fuentes holds beliefs that are incompatible with the existence of Andrew Tate, the existence of Sneako, and their place in Western society. Not even to mention Myron, who is a full black Muslim man. So when we sit here and talk about, like Andrew Tate welcoming this man back on Twitter, it's like, when are these because it's like the right wing is eventually going to eat itself. Currently, right now, the right wing is having its anti-Jewish situation right now. There has to be, at some point, there's going to be some level of fallout as it pertains to black people. Andrew Tate welcoming back Nick Fuentes. I got to see this. I don't understand how conservatives who have differences with the Groyper beliefs could sit there and embrace that. Like significantly important differences, such as your race. Like, it blows my mind that Andrew Tate, simply because Nick Fuentes was unbanned, all of a sudden sees a similarity between himself and Fuentes. I don't really understand it. Now, I'm not going to go hard on Fuentes. I'm not going to go in on Fuentes because I usually know how this stuff goes. Usually the Groypers shut your account down, so I'm not even going to get into that. I'm not going to sit here and even like summon up any smoke as it pertains to Nick. But I'm gonna get back to the debate between Destiny and Nick and them.
You're gonna break your one rule. You come on the podcast, even though you quote unquote
you're obsessed with comic book
me,
villains.
Because as you said, I do like that movie. Because as you said a couple of years ago, you don't like when people like me talk to a large audience. You're the one that's hiding a political agenda.
7 people DM me to come here, okay? So I decided to come and hang out.
That's
but
my career was over a
Just as a real quick
couple weeks
reframing.
Hold on. Just Ed and Keith, I want to ask you both the same question. Is like seeing that back and forth between Nick and Destiny. Is there anything in that back and forth that should have been censored? Is there anything that could have, that could be considered hate speech or could have led to violence and should not be allowed on X or any other platform?
Look, I think it should be up to.
Bro, why are people acting like Nick has never said anything crazy before? Like, part of the reason why I'm familiar with how much crazy stuff Nick has said is because Nick is actually hilarious. Nick is actually funny. Like, it's not even a matter of debate. Nick is actually a funny guy. But it's because he's funny that I've dug through his content and Nick has said some questionable stuff. It blows my mind when people sit there and act like Nick would never say anything that would warrant him being banned. Yes, he would, and he probably will. Like, the reality is that his ideology is incredibly dependent upon, things that are just things that society doesn't accept anymore as it pertains to women and people of color and people of other religions and people of other races. It's just, there has to be some level of acknowledgement by people on the right that Nick does have some beliefs that are a little bit out there. A little bit is putting it lightly. I'm going to put it lightly. Nick Fuentes has some crazy beliefs. And I'm genuinely curious to see what happens when he says some wild shit on his fucking Twitter. And then all these people in here who are trying to make it seem like Nick would never say anything worth being banned for. I genuinely want to see what they're going to say. Nick has said some questionable things in the past. And I would respect conservatives and right wingers a lot more if they would actually sit there and say, yeah, Nick has said some crazy things in the past. We want him back, but Nick does say crazy stuff. Because I'm going to keep it 100. I don't want Nick Fuentes banned on Twitter. I don't. I want Nick Fuentes to be on Twitter. However, I'm not going to sit here and act like Nick Fuentes doesn't say deplorable stuff. I'm not going to sit here and act like Nick Fuentes doesn't say stuff that I don't want permeating through society. I don't want Nick Fuentes' ideology becoming popular. I don't want that for this country. But I do want him to have a platform. I just need people like Andrew Tate, Sneako, Myron, and the rest. I need them to be honest and say, hey, look, yeah, we want Nick back, but we also admit Nick doesn't like black people. We also admit that Nick doesn't like Jewish people. We also admit that Nick doesn't like Hispanic people. There's a video of Nick Fuentes complaining about Mexicans when he went to McDonald's at like 3 a.m. I've watched his clips. I won't say I've watched his full streams, but I've watched his clips. He's got some questionable commentary. And I want him to have a platform. All I ask from conservatives on the right, and just right-wing people in general, is admit the nature of the man that you guys are advocating for. Admit what he believes. Admit to understanding and knowing what he brings to the table as a content creator, as a commentator on Twitter, and then move forward. But playing this game of, Nick, for the last few seconds of you talking to Destiny, did you say anything genocidal? Did you say anything racist? Did you say anything sexist? Of course he didn't. Y'all wanted to y'all want Nick to ramble like a madman when talking to Destiny? Like, expecting Nick to say a bunch of wild stuff when he's talking to Destiny, and then saying, well, Nick didn't say anything crazy in the span of y'all's 15-second conversation, so surely Nick would never say anything crazy once being reinstated on Twitter. Come on.
The platform itself. If a platform wants to censor certain types of hate speech or certain types of incitement of violence, I think they should be able to do that.
Even despite sorry to interrupt you, Ed, but despite the amount of influence they have now compared to 10, 20 years ago, like if you give them that right now and they all just meet in one room, they can essentially control speech around the world.
Yeah, but I think that's their right as a corporation. I don't,
Ed, what's the platform's primary objective?
Okay, I disagree on some level. I don't actually believe that platforms like Twitter should be able to just ban anybody for certain beliefs. Now, if you call for violence and stuff like that, obviously you should be removed from the platform. However, I do think that platforms like Twitter, back when it was still Twitter, Benji Mation said, oh, didn't know you were back. Yeah, I had to fix some things, but I'm back. So, yeah, the idea that somehow or another that Twitter and these other platforms should be able to ban anybody, I disagree. I think that we have currently reached a point in time where essential information is being spread on social media. It's being spread via social media. And it has to be acknowledged that people need to be able to access as many point of views as possible. I think that Twitter should not be able to just ban anybody. Twitter is a new public square. The internet is a new public square. The idea that you can receive the truth by just walking outside and absorbing the sunlight, those days are over. You can't walk down to the public square with the heralds screaming and waving newspapers at you. That's done. It's over. And we have to acknowledge that. I don't think a company like Twitter should be able to enjoy the privilege of being the public square of civilization while simultaneously being able to ban anybody for anything. With the privilege comes responsibility. However, like I said again, the people on the right are running away from responsibility. There's nothing wrong with keeping Nick on. I don't think there's a problem with having Nick on the platform. The problem is denying and trying to run away from who you are bringing on. Admit that this man is a white supremacist. Admit that this man does not like black people. Admit that this man does not like mixed people. Admit who you're bringing on. That's all I ask. If it were me, I'd say I am reinstating the white nationalist, white supremacist, anti-Semite, anti-black Nick Fuentes. Bringing him back, but I'm still going to be honest about who we're bringing back.
The platforms, what platform are you referring to?
All of them. Why do social media companies exist? What's their primary objective?
To make money.
To make money. And you're saying that they should be allowed to ban certain speech they don't like if that allows them to make more money, correct?
I believe, as in capitalism, I believe that's the way it should be.
So if Pfizer came along and decided to give a bunch of money to one of these social media platforms, would they allow anti-COVID vaccine conversations and speech or vaccine injury proof on their platform, or would they censor it to make as much money as possible?
I think it's up to them as a corporation to do as they please, just like Donald Trump with Truth Social has censored liberals from his site.
That's fine, but we're talking about people getting injured from the vaccine.
I think Elon Musk has the absolute right to run it the way he wants to do it.
That's fine.
And under his terms, that is, as long as something doesn't break the law, and I guess that can be subjective to some, like what's going on in Brazil. I think that's his right, and I think if that's the best way to run it, that his platform will probably succeed.
Cool. So vaccine. I understand what you're saying. So vaccine injuries do exist. However, the platform's objective is to make as much money as possible, and Pfizer is funding the platform, so they're going to pretend vaccine injuries do not exist. So they are purporting a false version of reality. They are creating and aiding the matrix and making people believe a version of reality that is not true, primarily for financial profit. And those with the global centralized capital can control narratives and can control the world even at a better level than most political parties. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, unmute, Ed. I have to mute you 'cause
Wait,
there's echo.
Pfizer is not even worth
there's
that much money.
alternatives,
Why would
right?
we assume Pfizer can control speech on?
It's an example.
Yeah, see,
Destiny.
like
Ed, go
so
ahead.
you keep saying blaming it on the advertiser or a company that's paying these companies. It's up to the media company. It's up to their shareholders what's in the best interest of those companies. That's how capitalism works in America. That's what I think most conservatives are embrace.
I'm low-key quaking in my boots about this topic because I lost my last channel talking about this topic. Yeah, this is not my first channel. I'm not even gonna lie to y'all. This is my second. So I'm very much concerned about this particular topic that Andrew has brought up here. It's already bad enough we're talking about Nick Fuentes. It's bad enough that Andrew is now also bringing this up. Let's see how we can navigate this one.
Embrace
Pfizer,
capitalism. Let the companies make up their own mind. If one business
buying
idea
all
is
the
that failed,
speech
is
on
not going to
all the
work out.
fucking-
If
it's
people
such
don't
a
like that, they're
stupid
going
idea.
to move
It's so
to another
childish.
platform. And we're seeing that with a lot of people who are moving away from Facebook and onto X because they don't like this level of censorship they're getting on other platforms. So they move to X. Just like the media, that you can watch Fox News, you can watch News Nation, you can watch, there's a plethora of different media outlets that you can consume if you don't like what one media outlet's putting out there. It's not the government saying, oh, the media can't talk about the Pfizer vaccine or say that it has side effects. If that would be an infringement on the First Amendment. But in capitalistic society, these companies can run the way they want without government interference. So if the government starts interfering and saying you can't run your platform how you want, then that's going to be the government interference, and that's going to be against the First Amendment.
Okay, well, that's another argument because there was Twitter files and there's a whole rabbit hole. People
Well,
know
and the
more
Twitter files
than
also,
me.
I mean, the Twitter files showed that a lot of stuff went on. People requested a lot of things to be removed. And Twitter, being a publicly run company, publicly held company, they made up their mind on what they believed was best for their
Let me
shareholders.
simplify the question. Do you believe the people? So what you're effectively saying, we agree on the fact that those with the money can control certain narratives and how they're perceived and discussed. Would you agree with that?
Those with money definitely have more control, yes.
Yes, and they can control on a public forum how certain things are perceived and discussed because they have the money. And when I say advertise, what I truthfully mean is donate and lobby. That's what they do. They donate and lobby to platforms to get their point of view.
Yeah,
across.
of course, on certain platforms they can, but on certain platforms they can't. Like, let's say X, for example.
Well, absolutely, because it's free speech. So this is where we're going back into I'm only going back over this because we talked about it earlier when you guys were saying the primary objective of the media is to make money. And I said,
that is the primary objective. I mean,
okay,
there's really no argument.
I'm not as big as a channel as Destiny, so I can't really say exactly what I want to say. I have to tread a really thin line here. Because YouTube does not play that stuff at all. And I'm not about to risk it all behind this topic. Let's see if we can move to safer ground. I know it's pussy. I know I'm being scared, but bear with me. I'm not about to risk it all over this particular topic.
And you can just go and make a news channel and maybe you'll get in. It's one big club and you're not in it. And it's control.
So Andrew, you haven't answered my question before. So when you say the mainstream media, are you talking about, let's say, Chris Cuomo when he was on CNN? Are you talking like is he being fed this information that he's only
I'll
allowed?
be honest. I'll be very honest with you. What I think of mainstream news broadcasters, I think they're idiots who are dragged from obscurity and they sit down in front of a teleprompter. And I think anybody can do their job. And Don Lemon's monumental failure has proved that perfectly because since he left CNN, nobody's given a shit. I think he has 500 views on any of his videos. He's some random idiot they plucked from obscurity, sat him down, he read the teleprompter. It's not about who reads the teleprompter, sir. It's about who decides what's on the teleprompter in the first place. That's the actual discussion we're having here. It's nothing to do with which jackass could sell his soul and sit down and read the garbage.
So many of those shows that individual, whoever has that show, they have their team, and they're not necessarily being fed everything they have to say. They're allowed to have opinions themselves.
My friend, and I call you my friend.
I mean, both of these guys are right and wrong at the same time. There have been instances where I don't want to call them political pundits. I'll call them news anchors. I wouldn't go so far as to call Don Lemon a pundit because his career has never been that theatrical and that interesting. But news anchors, such as Don Lemon, have had incidents where he's shared opinions that were a little bit different. He's received blowback for it, but there have been times where, news anchors have disagreed with other people on the show. There have been times they've had differences in opinion. But I think it's actually really, really interesting because Krasenstein's Andrew Tate is also right, but his point also works against him. He talks about how it's not about who's giving the information. It's about who's giving them the instructions. It's not about Tucker Carlson. It's not about Caitlin Collins. It's not about Laura Ingraham. It's about the people writing up the script for them. Here's the problem with that. Tucker Carlson was receiving false information, claiming that the election was stolen. He was lying. This man is no different. Tucker's no different. He received marching orders. He followed them. Now, he personally didn't believe it was true, but he followed the marching orders nonetheless. That has to be spoken about and that has to be called out. The problem is, these right-wingers think their side is bereft of this. It is not. Fox News took it upon themselves to do Trump's dirty work and accuse Dominion Voting of something that was false. Tucker Carlson chose to receive false information he knew and believed was false, and chose to parrot it on his show. So when we sit here and talk about, it's not about the person who's spewing the information in front of the camera, it's about the people writing it up for them behind the scenes. Okay, well, let's talk about when Tucker Carlson was spewing BS information. There were people behind the scenes writing up BS for him. Does anyone on this platform does anyone in this little chat room who obviously agrees with and supports Tucker Carlson, would any of them like to take the stand and actually support that? Would any of them like to take the stand and back up Tucker Carlson knowingly and actively peddling false information at the behest of Fox News? I don't think so. So both of these guys are right. The problem is Andrew Tate and his ilk are unwilling to admit that sometimes their side does the same thing. Neither side is above lies. Neither side is above misinformation. Neither side is above, manipulation. It's a fantasy to think that the conservative right is this bastion of independent thought and truth.
I'm glad you're calling me
I'm about to call you an idiot. Because you're an idiot, sir.
Tucker Carlson said the exact same thing.
I ain't gonna lie, Andrew
he
was
had
funny.
Basically full editorial.
Didn't Tucker get fired for having an opinion that went outside of the narrative of Fox News?
No, Tucker got fired because he almost cost Fox News $1 billion for lying on air. It's funny that you defend the fact that he had an original opinion. What you're actually defending is misinformation and lies, which is supposed to be something you guys are against.
There we go.
Which opinion was this? That's not what I heard. Tell me.
Well, see, here's the thing, right? Andrew Tate doesn't know. And this is the problem with alternative media and the popularization of alternative media. These guys don't know what they're talking about. And millions of people all around the world are waiting with bated breath for everything Andrew Tate and others like him have to say. When the information is readily available, the leaks of Tucker Carlson's text messages readily available, the idea that somehow or another this is some big scheme in which Tucker Carlson was ousted from Fox News for not towing the party line is absolutely false. Entirely false in every single way. The reality is simple. Tucker Carlson made a decision to peddle false information at the behest of Fox, and it almost cost them billions, specifically because Tucker, behind the scenes, was saying, man, this is all bunk. This is all BS. I don't believe this stuff. This is all incorrect. It cost them billions. It cost Fox News, I think it cost Fox News almost $1 billion, not billions, almost $1 billion. And Andrew Tate doesn't even know. But Andrew Tate can go on his platform, and rightfully so, I got nothing against it, but Andrew Tate can go on his show and tell his audience of young men that Tucker Carlson was somehow or another removed for having an opinion that was against the narrative, when in reality, Tucker Carlson knew the truth, chose to walk around the truth for the sake of his own job and for the sake of his own career, and chose to peddle false information and to slander the reputation of Dominion Voting. That's the truth. And it's not hidden either. It's not hidden information. The elites aren't manipulating this. There's no there's no shadowy organization hiding the information. Tucker Carlson, of his own free will, chose to do it. The information is available, but Andrew Tate doesn't even know. So what boggles my mind is Fox News, a professional media outlet, to call them a media outlet is understating how big they are. Fox News, a massive media company, got a story wrong on purpose, but they still misrepresented the facts on purpose. If they could get the story wrong, be it purposefully or by accident, how can I trust Andrew Tate, who's just one guy? How could you possibly compete with Fox News, CNN, MSNBC? You've got stuff to do. That man probably got kids. He's got money to make. He's got business to take care of. I don't expect him to be as informed as he should be. But herein lies the problem, is people with massive opinions with minute information. And then we get situations like this where he's like, Tucker Carlson got kicked off Fox News because he didn't agree with the narrative. Is that why Don Lemon was fired from CNN? Because he didn't agree with the narrative? Like, is that why Chris Cuomo was gotten rid of? How do we know automatically that because someone was removed from the mainstream media, they didn't agree with the narrative? It's a really simplistic way of looking at the world, but one of the things I said before on the last stream was that it's unfortunately not that simple. It's not as simple as, oh my god, person lost their job on massive media company, the elites got rid of them. It's more complicated than that. It always has been. It always will be. Every situation should be treated with a certain level of scrutiny. If they say, oh, Tucker got fired because he went against the narrative, okay, let me take time out of my day to actually figure out what Tucker did wrong. What did he do? What did he say? That's important to me. More so than just believing an easy narrative. It's easy to believe he was fired for all of these, conspiratorial reasons. It's a lot harder to sit there and read about it and realize, oh, this is simply a case of business going wrong. Simply that. A case of business going wrong.
Please educate me, Dustin.
The Fox News, the Dominion lawsuit, there were texts that were leaked from him where he admitted that he was lying on air about claims that Sidney Powell had made to him, and he was tired of lying to his audience about things about the Dominion voting machines being rigged.
Well, I don't know if that's a lie at all.
You don't know anything because you don't read any media. That's why you're out here saying things like they get marching orders from everybody. You don't know how any of these media companies are structured. You don't know where the teams get their information from. People that work in media are the most social media hungry people in the universe. You think that all these people in all these networks across all these countries are getting fed the same marching orders and nobody's leaked anything, nobody's complained about anything, nobody's said anything? And why do we think that mainstream media is any more insulated from these problems than alternative media is? You guys will make fun of the marching orders from mainstream media, but I bet every single alternative media guy in here is anti-vax, thinks COVID came from a bioweapons lab, thinks that Russia has a right to invade Ukraine, thinks that all the charges against Donald Trump are made up, thinks that we shouldn't be supporting Israel. Like, you guys have literally copy-pasted the same opinions between every single one of you, and you guys are talking like an army of NPCs about how the mainstream media gives you fabricated opinions. It doesn't even make sense.
Yes.
Yeah, there's more similarities between both sides than there are differences. Almost all of these right-wing guys believe the exact same stuff. It's predictable, no different from left-wing people. The right has convinced themselves that they're somehow beyond the bullshit simply because the left engaged in massive censorship culture for quite some time. And I gotta admit, liberals watching this, we did engage in some serious censorship culture for quite some time. So now the right wing enjoys this almost pseudo factual world in which everything they say is true and counter narrative and counter culture, and it's what the power wants to hide. They've been able to take what happened with the what situation in 2020. I'm scared to even say the name of it. But they've taken that situation and how the left acted with that, in conjunction with every other act of censorship the left is engaged in, and have now taken that cape and put it over all of conservative media and said, because the left engaged in these behaviors, these particular times, they're always lying. They're always making stuff up, and we're always right. And this is why you see people like Candace Owens and Sneako being obsessed with counter narratives, obsessed with just being a, what's the word that I'm looking for here? They like being a contrarian. They like to contradict what everyone else is saying, regardless of whether it's actually true, because conservatives have been lulled into a false sense of security by the left censorship. They now believe, out of convenience for themselves, that every single thing the left wing says is a lie. Any pushback will automatically be censored, and any pushback is automatically always true if the left doesn't agree with it. And that's the spot that we're at right now, where right-wingers don't even attempt to research what they believe in because they automatically assume that because the left disagrees with it, it must be true. That's where we're at right now. Intellectual laziness on both sides.
We do all think the truth. That is
crazy how truth can be a perspective there, huh? But when you all think the same thing, it's not a conspiracy, but when the mainstream media does, it is a conspiracy. Crazy how that works.
I just said that different state-sponsored broadcasters would have conflicting points of view.
But they don't. Do you watch any media? Have you followed any media?
Course,
they don't typically have conflicting opinions. When you're reporting on international media, the stories are more or less the same.
And a BBC segment, they often directly conflict.
No, very rarely. On the facts, no. Maybe if you're watching a pundit or you're reading op-eds, they will. But if you have any amount of media literacy, a really great example that works against your Israel stuff, by the way, was the reporting of that Al-Alissi hospital bombing, where everybody was saying that Israel bombed that parking lot. Every single mainstream media outlet in the world ran with that story for 2 days. I mean, how did that work if Israel controls the media? Or how does that work if they all give conflicting accounts and reports? It's because they don't. It's because everybody relies on, people that are reporting on the ground. It goes through their media teams. They publish what they think is right. Sometimes people fuck up. But there doesn't have to be a top-down conspiracy to explain why.
Sure did change the headlines very quickly, Destiny.
After more information came out. Yes, sir. That's how it works.
When fake news came out.
This is so naive. There have been so many lies, specifically about wars. It's insane.
I mean, Nick calling this naive is ridiculous. People get things wrong in the news. This is the problem with conspiratorial thought. This idea that people automatically know what did happen from the jump. That's just not how it works. Events happen. The people who saw it give differentiating opinions, perspectives, witnessing, witness reports, all of that. So a journalist who's on the ground could ask someone, "Hey, what happened?" and get a slightly, different story from another journalist who asks someone else. Now you have two differing perspectives of what took place, just like that alone. The idea that journalists can't get things wrong, the idea that the main narrative or the main story can't get things wrong is just false. Are there lies that take place in war? Of course. A lot of people, it's generally believed that the cause for the Iraq War was a lie. Lies take place. But the reality is that sometimes things are believed to be true. Later on, people find out they're not true. And then fix the information. That's just the way it is. Sometimes people get things wrong. It's boring that way. I understand it is. It's very boring to have to sit there and say, more than likely, more than likely, more than likely, there was no foul play. There was no conspiracy. Someone just got something wrong. The end. That sucks. It's boring. It's not fun. It's not really the most entertaining way to perceive the world. I get it 100%. It's boring to have to sit there and say, maybe Israel maybe we got it wrong about whether Israel blew this up or blew that up. Maybe we just got it wrong. That's boring. But it's oftentimes the truth. And to be honest, I would prefer a world in which we made mistakes than a world in which there was a massive conspiracy in which we had to watch over our shoulders as a planet 24/7 because there's this big cabal or small cabal running everything and switching narratives every 5 seconds. Sometimes things are just misreported.
That you would even bring that up. Before the 2020 election, there was a big story about how Russians were putting a bounty on the head of American soldiers in Iraq. You remember this? And they said Trump is allying with Russia, who's killing our soldiers. Then a year after, and by the way, that's after the election, they came out and said, that wasn't true. They came out and said, well, we source our intelligence on the ground. Some of it has a high degree of confidence and some of it has a low degree. And this one had no degree of confidence. But it took them a year to correct it after it had already served its purpose. Same thing with the Hunter Biden laptop. They totally put the lid on that one because they said, we were told it's Russian disinformation. Turned out to be authentic after the election, just like the 40 beheaded babies. 40 beheaded babies, 40 babies and their heads are off. I can't believe it. And then they found out in December, after Israel had already invaded, after they blockaded Gaza, after everything, they said, that was all fabricated. It's a complete lie. Same thing with Ukraine. I remember when we debated, they said Russia blew up a nuclear reactor because they're trying to do another Chernobyl. Turned out that was bullshit. So those are just like off the top of my head, 5 examples about 3 different conflicts where, they report it. It serves its purpose, and then they revise it a year later after they got what they wanted. And you, because you believe their alibi, because you don't understand the distinction between power and powerless, between government and people, you say, no, I think they got more information. They found out that the propaganda that they created for their efficient purpose, they found out.
Well, if it was a conspiracy, why admit that it was wrong? If they have this level of control over the truth and they can manipulate the truth, why come out a year later and say, we got it wrong? What's the purpose of that? If they spawn the story, right, then surely they control the reins of the story. They control the destiny, no pun intended, of the story. They control the destination of the story. Why would they report something and then a year later say, we got it wrong. We're sorry. Why would you do that? If the goal is to affect the minds of the public, why admit a year later that you messed up? Why? If they're so in control, if they run the show to such an extent, why ever admit that you got it wrong? Why? It makes no sense to me. What would be the purpose of trying to I genuinely don't understand what would be the purpose. If they actually were controlling everything, it would make far more sense for them to not even revise it at all. Why come out a year later and say, maybe the Russians weren't putting bounties on American soldiers' heads? Why ever admit it? It's not like the Russians could prove that they're not doing it. Why ever admit that there was a mistake? Why? It makes no sense. I genuinely the problem with this logic, or rather lack thereof, is just completely there's no reliance on any sort of factual information at all. And there's no realistic interpretation of the facts, no realistic interpretation of life, of anything. It's just like the idea that somehow or another they want to run the world, but they don't, hold up. I got a text from my aunt. The problem is, Nick Fuentes wants to live in this world where these people run everything all the time and control everything, but simultaneously apologize for getting the story wrong a year later. Why would they do that?
That was a lie because, these are just really earnest people like you and I trying to get it right, as opposed to very interested parties in government, finance, wherever you find it. So those are just a few examples off the top of my head. They learn more information, just like in Iraq,
maybe
right?
people just
They
get
learned there were
stories
no
wrong.
weapons of mass
Maybe
destruction
it's
in Iraq.
possible because it happened on the other side too. How many people were saying, "Oh, there's no way that Russia's going to invade Ukraine. That's bullshit. The U.S. intelligence must be lying because Nick said that they lie about the intel all the time." Well, guess what? That happened. Oh, well, there are no fighters in Al Shifa Hospital. That can't possibly be the case. Oh, whoops, we found CCTV footage that shows otherwise. Oh no, hydroxychloroquine is a way better drug than remdesivir. This is going to be the ivermectin is going to save all of us. Oh, looks like none of that was true. Oh, people get things wrong. Some people lie. You have to be intelligent enough to call out fault. That wasn't even a syllogism, dipshit.
That's a false syllogism.
No, that wasn't even a syllogism, dipshit. Listen, people get things wrong sometimes. You have to be more intelligent. You've got to be more sophisticated when you go through media, and you have to understand sometimes people they get shit wrong. Sometimes people do lie, but why the you trust people who in alternative media who are like teams of 1 to 4 highly ideologically driven people versus entire media conglomerates that are being fact checked or have dozens or sometimes hundreds of workers in some of these offices. The ability for you to lie about something is going to be way higher.
How much do you know about the CIA's history of influencing media?
What an amazing question. I don't know. How much do you know about?
I often don't hear people like you and Ed and Brian digging into the history of the national intelligence state directly influencing media.
Okay, that's not even a point. What are you even saying? How much do you know about the CIA influencing media? Okay, can you demonstrate anything? Can you actually show anything? Or are you just going to say stuff and just hope it lands? You have to actually demonstrate where the CIA is doing this, whether they're doing it now. Can you point to any situation currently right now in which the CIA is directly influencing or altering information as we speak? I wouldn't put it past intelligence agencies to be interfering and meddling with media, but if you're going to completely disbelieve anything the mainstream media says about anything because once upon a time the CIA was getting rowdy, that's not grown man, like, bro, like, come on, bro, like, you're being a little kid. Like, for example, Trump sitting there talking about some, they're my documents, they're mine. These people have charged him with withholding documents from the feds. He gets on stage and says, they're my documents. I'm supposed to believe the CIA is the reason why Trump is being charged? Or could it possibly be, maybe the man was withholding documents illegally? He gets on stage and says, they're my documents. No, they're not. They belong to the United States of America. Okay? They belong to the United States, not you. You're not the seated president. It's not your documents. Okay? You haven't even requested for them to be declassified so you can take them with you at all. You want the classified documents to be considered yours too. And that's just not realistic. That's just not even fair. Like, that's just ridiculous. And this is the guy who wants us all to believe the state is conspiring against him while he simultaneously gets on stage and self-snitches. How am I supposed to sit there and believe the CIA is conspiring against you, but you get on stage and you sit there and say all this dumb shit like, it's my documents? I'm just saying. I want to believe everybody. I really do. I don't want to seem like I don't want to seem biased, but like at the same time, like there has to be some like expectation of there's got to be some, we got to be reasonable here.